Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening, and welcome to the latest edition of OPDC's Let's Talk and Oakwatch. Liz started us off pretty well here just a moment ago by dropping her name and her title or her identification in the chat. If anybody else would like to do the same, please do, but you're also welcome to stay where you are. Today, we're going to have a bunch of different things on this evening's agenda. We're going to start it off with a discussion about a couple of one upcoming project and a couple of ideas for how to make Oakland a more welcoming place for seniors living here, as well as specifically LGBTQ seniors. There's a project that the Presbyterian SeniorCare is going to be presenting, and we would love everybody's input on this and on the topic in general. And we're going to follow that discussion then with an update from DOMI regarding the Neighborhood Slow Street program and procedures for road closures, both temporary and permanent. And then we're going to follow that with some Oakwatch updates and updates from our community partners. So that is our meeting, and I hope that all of you will feel free, please, to join into this discussion. We're typically hoping to make sure that these meetings in the future are less slide heavy, but there was a lot of information that the people who are presenting today had to show you, so this meeting format is going to be a little bit more slide heavy. But if you have questions, or if you'd like to be able to raise your hand or drop something in the chat or get my attention in some other way, we can definitely have an open discussion. So joining us this evening, David Ennis, who's on this agenda, is actually trapped apparently on a ferry at the moment and is not going to be able to join us, but Dan Rothschild from Rothschild Oil and Jim Pfeiffer are going to be presenting. And we're not sure yet whether or not we have Marty. Then Grant Scott, Jeff Miller, and Randy Vega are also joining us. Randy Vega from the Age-Friendly Greater Pittsburgh, and Grant Scott and Jeff Miller from the AARP LGBTQ Committee. So with that, hopefully we can get started. So I'm not sure exactly how you'd like to be able to present the Presbyterian SeniorCare project. Not sure who's driving the bus.
Jim, go ahead. You're muted right now.
There you go. Good evening. Hi. I guess I'm driving the bus. My name is Jim Pfeiffer, and I am the incoming president and CEO of Presbyterian SeniorCare. We're based in Oakmont, Pennsylvania, and I've been with the organization for the past 36 years and worked in the affordable housing component of what we've been doing for the past 32 years. So very pleased to be able to talk with all of you today about this very innovative community that we're hoping will be a part of the Oakland community. Special to me, I grew up right across the river in the South Side, walked up Forbes Avenue several hundred times to the Graduate School of Public Health, to Pitt football games, and one of my best friends lived right across the street from St. Agnes Church. So lots of time in Oakland in my early career. So a little bit about Presbyterian SeniorCare Network. We've been serving the greater Pittsburgh community for the past 93 years. According to the Pittsburgh Business Times, we're the largest provider of senior services in southwestern Pennsylvania. We serve about 6,500 seniors and persons with disabilities every year. We are a very nonprofit organization. And do about $2 million a year in free care, as well as another $25 million in charitable contractual contributions. And we provide the entire continuum of care. We have nursing homes, retirement communities, assisted living, And we have 32 affordable housing communities in our current portfolio that serve about 2,000 seniors and persons with disabilities each year. 8 of those communities are located within the city of Pittsburgh. We've been working in affordable housing since 1985 and in the city of Pittsburgh since 1986. Some of those communities we own, some we manage, and some we own in partnership with a group called Affirmative Investments out of Boston. And they are our proposed partner for this particular community development. We have been working together with Affirmative for about 25 years. And
why now? Why push back the first day of school? And why change the school start times?
I'm sorry, does someone have a question? No. So we've been working with Affirmative Investments for about 25 years. And we have 4 communities with them in the city. The closest to you might be Lawrenceville. We also have 3 communities in the East End, in Homewood, Friendship, and Stanton Heights that we would welcome anyone to visit or to see at any point in time as a part of due diligence for our organization and our commitment to the city of Pittsburgh. So we're here to stay. We're not a real estate development organization. We develop real estate in order to provide services to seniors. In our 35 years, we've never sold or abandoned one of our communities. And we're very proud of the track record that we have as an organization. So it's exciting for us to continue our ministry in affordable housing, in the city. And we're very excited to have Affirmative Investments as a partner. They are known up and down the East Coast as one of the most innovative financing and development groups. And we've been very pleased with them. They've also done a lot of work with the Urban Redevelopment Authority in Pittsburgh as well. So they have a lot of experience in Pittsburgh, both in affordable senior housing as well as new market tax credit work. So that's a little bit of background about us. A little background on our journey to develop this particular housing community. And so it starts really with our commitment as an organization to diversity, equity, and inclusion. As we've worked on that journey, one of the things that we've, one of the organizations that we connected to was a group called PERSAD, which is located in the Lawrenceville area. And they were instrumental in helping us work on some of our diversity and inclusion initiatives with our employees and our residents. And at a meeting about 2.5 or 3 years ago at their offices, a person who worked there at the time, Kathy Boyle, who was their associate director, approached me about the possibility about developing an LGBTQ friendly community in Pittsburgh. She had heard of a community in Philadelphia that had been developed and felt that it'd be a great opportunity for us to develop a community in Pittsburgh. So we began to do some investigation into LGBT projects in the country, found there were only a few of them at that time, and there are still only a few. We had an opportunity to visit the community in Philadelphia called John C. Anderson Apartments. It was also financed by the PHFA, Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, which is who 7 or 8 of our communities are financed by. So I had a chance to really learn from some of the things that they have done. And then we also visited a community in Chicago that was developed by one of our potential investment partners called Town Hall, located in the Wrigley Field area, connected to a large senior center, which also has a ministry to the LGBT community. Are you trying to jump in here?
Sorry, I just wanted to say that we have a pretty short amount of time here, so I think a lot of people are curious about this specific project, where it's going to be located, and what kinds of,
Yep.
how this is going to impact the Oakland community.
Okay, good. I'm getting there. Sorry. So we did a series of focus groups. The East End was defined, was identified as the area that was most desirable to the community. So we looked at sites in Lawrenceville and in Oakland. And then the last year or so, working together with some of our partners, we identified the site at the corner of Forbes and Craft as our development opportunity. And I think most of you have been able to see the sketchbook around that. And Dan Rothschild, who we selected as our architect for the project, will talk here in a moment. We have a community designed 54 affordable senior housing apartments designated for seniors 55 and over. We're in the process of going through city planning. We have had some preliminary conversations with them. We're beginning to prepare for a low-income housing tax credit application that we think will likely go in the November-December time period. It is yet to be determined. We're very committed to a service-enriched aging in place model. Our communities provide a lot of services like service coordination and connections. It will not be a licensed care center. It will be independent living for seniors. And so that's where our plan takes us. So I'm sorry, I thought we had 35 minutes to present. That's what I was told. So I just wanted to give enough background so all of you would sort of understand where we're coming from as a nonprofit provider, how our ministry, with the LGBT community, kind of got started. This project will be, if financed, we will have to make a 40-year commitment to affordable senior housing on this site. And it will also be inspected every year, and we will have to follow guidelines and regulations by the state and federal government. Encourage you to check us out. Go to the Presbyterian SeniorCare website to learn more about us. Very proud of our history in service. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dan Rothschild. Sorry for the confusion.
Thank you, Jim. And Andrea, I'm going to go ahead and share content. And there we go. Let me just get this oriented on my screen. Voila. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for the honor of presenting tonight. I am Dan Rothschild, president of Rothschild Dono Collaborative. With me tonight on the screen here is Jeff Campbell, one of my partners, and Chick Knoll, also a member of our organization. I'm not going to go into too much background on us, but suffice to say that we've been in business 32 years. We're located in the Strip District, and one of our core practices is affordable housing. We've done award-winning affordable housing projects in and around Pittsburgh, and I welcome you to look at our website as well, as Jim had said. What we're going to see tonight is just the very beginning of sketches of understanding what to do with this site. We always feel as community partners to have a meeting like this at the ground floor. So you're not going to see finished drawings, you're not going to see finished renderings, you're not going to see beautiful pictures. You're going to see a series of ideas and analysis on what we may be able to do to look at this very prominent site in Oakland. As you're familiar with this site, this is one of the gateway sites coming in off the Parkway, right under the underpass of the Boulevard of the Allies. So as architects, we're very much aware that this project will send a message as to you're entering a very special district in Pittsburgh. So here's the site. Craft Avenue's going here. Forbes is going here. Here's the Boulevard of the Allies. we are not this site. We are not the Oakland portal site. There may have been some information earlier that linked our name with that. We are the site after that. I have a photograph to show you exactly where we are. We're the grassy part. We're not the asphalt part. So just wanted to make that distinction. And around us, obviously, we have the Carlo Science Building. We have the McGee Research Center, McGee all the way over here, Carlo all the way over here. One of the things that architects have to do with their clients to get started is understand zoning. We understand that this is a very special zoning district. It's like an island. It's surrounded by the institutional master plan of McGee, the institutional master plan of Carlo, and then the Forbes 5th public realm district, which starts right up Craft Avenue. So the Boulevard of the Alleys zoning district is very unique. It's this island that gets split by the Boulevard of the Alleys. So we have to tell our client we have special responsibilities if we're building in that district. And I'm not going to go over all these, but you have this information. We understand that this is a highly visible entrance, that this is going to be very important. The entrance shall face the Boulevard of the Allies. And there are other things that we have to look at that are very important. So we're very much aware that this is not just any district, that this is a special zoning district with special design guidelines. So here's a bunch of scribble scrabbles just showing how an architect looks at a site different than looking at Google Earth. But what do you really see here? What you really see is that it's a very heavily traveled off-ramp. In the morning during rush hour, it's backed up. Vehicles all day, 3 ways, 1 traffic. Very unique in that regard. But what that does is it tells us that the corner of our building right here is really going to be one of the first impressions you get of Oakland. So as a team, and we consider ourselves working with communities as a team, what do we do to that corner? The corner expression is going to be very important. It needs to be a wow, and it needs to say the message that we decide as a group need to be said. It could show that we're diverse, inclusive, environmental, technological, transparent, open, bright. What are the words that we want to use to describe? Because a building can tell a story, and we consider ourselves storytellers, and we want to tell this story very well. This could be a beacon of light, welcoming people to Oakland to show what we're for. And to have the honor of working on an LGBTQ project, I don't know if Jim mentioned, there are only a handful of these affordable housing projects across the country. So this is also going to have a very special place nationally. The other thing that you'll notice is we have a triangular site, which is sort of a hardship. Typically, sites are rectangular. We have a steep slope in the back, if you're familiar with what goes on there. We have this little tail to the property here that we've acquired. A lot of unique things here that we have to figure out. Also notice that the new BRT will have a stop right on the next block, right in front of McGee, the BRT, bus rapid transit that's planned. So this is the site, right? We're familiar with this site. It has the UPMC little landscape thing, heavily landscaped in the back. But what we look at from an architectural standpoint, we look at the topography to understand what those challenges are. And we call this Pittsburgh flat. There's nothing in Pittsburgh left that's flat anymore. What we have here are 3 flat areas, what we're calling Area 1 and Area 2, which are 10 feet separated. And then up here on Craft Avenue, it's separated even further. So you're familiar with this site. It's like a little ski slope here. And then it goes up to Craft Avenue. And Andrea, I'm trying to go through this quickly so we have plenty of time for questions. I see you smiling there. So here's another challenge. We have a one-way street, 3 lanes of traffic. We have a terrace site. So we have a little bit of an access question. how do you access the site? Well, if you're coming over the parkway, that's pretty easy. You come under the underpass and you come into our site. But what if you're coming from the east? What if you're coming from Monroeville or Shadyside or Highland Park? What happens is you go on what we call the 5th Forbes loop. You have to come up Craft or come down 5th, get to this intersection right here. Then you have to go down 5th, make a left at Moultrie, come back at Forbes Avenue, continue on the loop. There's a little cartoon. Are we there yet? And then come into your property. That's not great access if you're trying to get people to stay in their apartment building. So we have that issue. You really can't come down McDevitt or Galena Way. There's a traffic island right here that makes you go to the right. You're not really going to cross 3 lanes of traffic. So throw traffic into the mix about how we're going to solve that. So here is an original initial idea. And the idea is going to be to create an L-shaped building. Oops. An L-shaped building with a very special corner. And what we're thinking initially, we do have a traffic engineer that's signed up. It's Cindy Jampol of Trans Associates that I'm sure has been in front of this group before. So we're getting her involved. She has not really even started at this point. What we're thinking about is trying to get some access off of Craft Avenue through the properties that are the tail of our property. That would allow traffic from the east to enter our building. We're looking at providing all the zoning required parking because there's not a lot of on-street parking in this area, right? This is not like something that we can depend on anybody walking to the project. So moving right along, and again, in the interest of time, I'm just going to go over sort of the layout of the building. This shows the access from Craft Avenue right here. And in the tail of the property, we're thinking of working with you to put in a linear park. Right now, it's heavily landscaped, not occupied, a little bit foresty if you look at it. And we're wondering if we do develop this corner, can we work with you to talk to McGee and to talk to Carlo to look at their 3 corners? And maybe we can come up with something that actually takes on a full gateway concept. And that is you're entering Oakland here. So we're going to start that with the linear park. It could have meaningful local artwork, maybe artwork that can be a joint venture between the residents and arts groups. We are thinking of having just a delivery only curb cut right here. That's still in process. But on this floor, you would enter a parking area and then come right into the 2nd floor where there'd be residents. On the corner of this building, you'll see that we have public spaces, and I'll get into that a little bit further. In the backyard, on the 2nd floor, we're looking to have a courtyard for the residents to have some private space away from the noise. So this is a typical floor right here. The typical floor has public space that's in the corner. And in the very corner, we're looking to have a fully glazed open seating area. So when you're coming off the parkway coming into Oakland, that this corner could be a place that's vibrant and occupied, that you would see residents there as you drive by. On the 5th floor, we have more public spaces, which would include an outdoor terrace on the top, as well as other public spaces, including a billiard room, a fireplace, card tables. We're really trying to make every floor here have its own social neighborhood. So every floor, and this is a little bit more public space than we have in other affordable housing environments. One of the reasons for the outside terraces, this would be the view from the, yes, Melly, there is only 5 floors to answer your question. This is the view from the top terrace overlooking Oakland and the Monongahela River. So that's pretty it. Just to show you our sensitivity to context. We're a very contextually oriented architect firm. You can see that in some of our projects. We looked across the street to try to understand, are there signals we can take from that? We looked at sky view right up the street, and we saw signals that we might not want to take, sort of the exposed ceiling on the underneath side of an open parking garage, which isn't very pleasant. So our eyes are wide open about our neighbors, but when you're in Oakland, you just got to be aware of the cathedral learning, if for no other reason, to show that you're an architect who knows when they see monumental buildings as a clue. So for those of you who want to see a doodle, this is a doodle. It's not a rendering, but this is what we call a massing diagram. And what you see there are, Millie, you were asking about the number of floors, and I want to show you one way that's done. It's either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with a basement, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 if the basement is counted as a floor. That is a building code issue. So rather than me saying it's 5 floors, why don't I tell you it's somewhere between 5 and 6 floors, depending on how the building code rules. But what you see right here is that, I'm going to change colors here for a moment, that the bottom floor is actually buried in the ground because the slope of Forbes Avenue slopes up. So just how the building is massed, basically you have the ground floor. The second floor, which has parking on this side, will be enclosed with a finished ceiling. The public spaces are on the corner of the building. The building moves in and out. So each one of these are poked out, and each one of these are poked in, so we avoid the long flat facade. We're hoping that this could be a very colorful building. We don't know that at this point in this rendering, but we're also hoping that this is contextual, that it could bring up bits and pieces of the architecture that's around. So at that point, the questions are coming in, Andrea. I think I'm gonna just stop, and that way I can answer the chat questions rather than continue. Is that okay with you? I see the thumbs up. So I'm just going to get the chat up on my screen here, and then I will continue to answer those questions. And then, you know, Andrea, from the agenda, I wasn't clear if Grant and Jim were also talking in the 6:10 to 6:45. Shall I give them time to speak as well? I wasn't clear on that.
We were hoping that we could have a bunch of different kinds of perspectives on projects like this and or other approaches to LGBTQ friendly senior housing in Oakland. And so because Jeff and Grant and Randy have been working collaboratively on other kinds of approaches, not specifically obviously this project, we just thought maybe it would be helpful to have some context. So I was hoping that there would be an ample opportunity for discussion and questions for all of you.
All right. It's 6:28. We'll be done in 5 minutes, which will be 6:33 or 6:35. And then we'll open the floor for you to continue with other perspectives. Does that sound good, Andrea?
That sounds great. Thank you. I think we have a lot of questions, clearly.
Yeah, but they can go through them. So Millie was first, only 5 floors. I answered that question. Elena asked, when you say public, do you mean other Oakland residents who don't live in your building? Elena, I don't know the context in which I use the word public, but what we are considerate of is that this first floor, even though it's in the ground, we want to make it look vibrant and active. So we do plan to have some service space on the first floor. That might be a small office for PERSAD or someone else. We also have bike storage there. We have the entrance. Maybe, Elena, you can send another chat message about when I said public, what the context was.
Actually,
or you can go ahead.
I unmuted myself. I think I realize now that you were talking about public versus private apartments versus the public part of the building.
Yes.
Not public use of the building by the public. I understand now.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Elena, I wasn't clear. Yes, it was social space outside of your apartment. What we love to do in affordable housing is create outdoor living rooms so people don't get siloed into their apartment. Thanks for being clear about the height. Do you need variance or a zoning change? Yes and no. We think we need 2 variances, and we think they're actually quite small. It has to do with a front yard setback and a rear yard setback. Both are at 20 feet in the zoning district. To give you a sense of context, the McGee Research Center is set back 10 feet, not 20. And in that 10 feet, they have planting and trees, and you know what that looks like. Actually, there's a photo right here that looks like that. So we would like to match that 10 feet. In the back, we pretty much are clear of the backyard, except the backyard is on an angle because it's in a triangle. So there's a little tip of our building that goes into the setback. So we're going to say that we have a hardship related to the geometry of our site being a triangle, and we're going to go for those 2 variances. We will not need a zoning change. Will it be brick? Millie, we are thinking of brick as one of the major materials on the facade. We see that as being something that is permanent and part of the Oakland expression, but we also see glass, and we may also want to bring in some color. And sometimes bricks can do that, sometimes they can't. So there might be some other colorful materials other than brick. How much parking? Right now, with the zoning code in 54 units, when we have the bicycle exception, I think we need around 33 parking spaces to meet zoning. We're going to provide 33, although what the traffic engineer will show you that in all of Presbyterian SeniorCare's projects in and around the city, the use of cars by the affordable housing residents is much less than what the city requires. In fact, they typically have somewhere in the 25% to 33% of units of residents who own cars. But what we're going to do, instead of going for the traffic impact study to say we don't need as much as zoning, we're going to provide zoning because there's no other place to park in this area. There's no on-street parking. So we're going to provide somewhere around 33 or 34 spaces. Is this the DAM meeting for this project? This is the friendly get to know you meeting. We were talking to Wanda about how to introduce ourselves. She said, come to the friendly get to know you meeting, but this is not the recognized community organization formal meeting. This is just like a look-see, much better than just sending it over Zoom. Relevant to the LIHTC application, it's a preliminary look for that, yes. No, there is parking in Oak Cliff. We're just worried about residents getting to crossing the streets and getting here. So of course, if people can find parking and come here, but we will provide ample parking for some visitors. We worry about others trying to park in our neighborhood a great deal. Yeah, that's why I think what I'll show is with 54 units, there may be 13 or so 18 residents who have cars. The rest will be an open parking garage. We'll have a system where visitors can come, security be let in, because we want to keep all the parking within our building to not overburden the neighborhood. It's 6:34. I'm a minute over, Andrea, but you can take the rest of the, I cede my time to the senator from Oakland for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you so much. That was extremely helpful. And I think that we probably still are going to have a bunch of questions coming in. But I was kind of hoping to be able to contextualize this project in the midst of a larger discussion also about, what kinds of senior housing really do we have an opportunity for in Oakland? What kinds of structures do we feel would be most supportive of LGBTQ community building efforts and welcoming? So I just would like to be able to continue this discussion with Grant and Jeff and Randy. And again, if anybody has questions or comments, let's pile them up in the chat. And I'd like to have some time for open discussion after this.
Okay, let me continue. I'm Jeff Miller. I'm a co-chair of the AARP LGBTQ+ older adult advocacy team. Also part of the LGBTQ community. PERSAD Center, which was mentioned earlier, did a survey a few years ago, and we found that 69% of those who responded were most concerned about housing among all the potential issues that they could face as they age. Other very important issues were social isolation and healthcare, transportation. All of these issues we think can be addressed in a number of ways, in a number of communities, but Oakland maybe is unique in having access to almost all of them readily available. Folks who grew up in my generation, even a little older, who have come to older years quite fearful because of the abusive kind of behaviors that they experienced when they were young. And so finding safe and affordable housing options, it's important for all older adults, but it's especially important for those of us in the LGBTQ+ community. So in addition, we are so excited about the Presbyterian SeniorCare project, and it's nearly ready to go into the building phase. And we're just keeping our fingers crossed that that will happen rapidly and without too much trouble. And we're very grateful for them for all they've done to get to this point. But one of the other options that we'd like to present, and maybe you all are already very familiar with it, but that's the concept of the accessory dwelling unit, or ADUs. Andrea, do you have that little video ready to show the animated one that's 1.5 minutes?
I asked Kathy to pull that off of the slides, but I'm happy to drop a link to it in the into the chat so people can look at it on their own as well. But it's also, Kathy, if we're able to pull that back up, we can show that.
Yeah, that it says in 90 seconds.
Just a sec.
What I would try, but I'm not on my own computer and I'm afraid I'd just lose everything.
Completely fine. Just one moment. Kathy's going to pull it up in a moment.
Grant is an architect who is working with our group. Randy is part of Age Friendly Greater Pittsburgh. We're all part of the ADU working group of our advocacy team. Our hope is to advocate for change. Here we go.
That was quick.
No. I think if you just hit the start arrow there in the middle of the house, it'll play.
I think Kathy had it embedded in the slide, and I think we needed to pull it up on the website.
Well,
it was just a sec. Sorry, I apologize for the technical hiccup. It's entirely my fault, not Kathy's. We could just preface this just a tiny bit by saying that accessory dwelling units at the moment are not part of Pittsburgh zoning code anywhere. And it's an open question, you know, how this might be considered within the Oakland context, where there are lots of constraints and issues, but then also an overwhelming need for affordability and creative ways of providing that kind of access. So, sorry, I will now shush.
well,
We might be in beach ball land here, sorry.
Okay, well, I could interject. ADUs are, or auxiliary dwelling units, are buildings that are small. You could almost think of them potentially as a group home. The zoning that's available to us talks about families that are blood relatives or whatever kind of verbiage they use to define that. And what we're asking is for an opportunity to create kind of group homes, where we think that one of the things that might be missing in the small housing market, where you have students and things like that, is oversight of the people that are occupying. And my experience comes from an interest. I'm way past retirement, but I'm driven by the idea that I think ADUs add to a house what a lot of people in my Regent Square neighborhood, we had ballerinas that lived with us for a while. We had students that lived with us for a while. And the opportunity to offer people on the way up a place to live and become part of a temporary family was a big deal. And that's what ADUs can do. You could turn a room in a house over to someone to live while they're in school. A lot of times they come in from small communities surrounding to Art Institute was a big grab on students from rural areas coming in to take classes for the week and then go back home over the weekend.
Grant, I'm going to stop you because I think we're going to be out of time here in like 3 minutes.
Yeah,
I just want to
okay.
be real clear that we're not talking about student housing. We're talking about housing where the owner lives on the premise. This could be like if you think of a in-law suite or an attic that's turned into a dwelling where parents could live safely with younger people on the bottom. It can be a garage that's converted into a small apartment in the back of the lot. But the thing that is very important is that there's an owner on the lot. These are generally like between 600 and 1,000 square feet. It's a way to use the land that you already have without having to buy land to provide housing for a larger number of people. We really don't have time, I don't think, to cover this adequately, but we did have several important links. Andrea, are they, can they be put into the chat? Maybe you've already done that.
I haven't, but I will grab them very shortly and do that. And the full, all of the 2 slides that you sent us are going to be posted on the website, and we will post a link to that as well to have it all in one place for anybody to see after the fact.
May I make one closing remark?
Of course.
I have known Dan Rothschild and I have tracked his organization for years. In fact, we helped him get started. I don't think there's a better firm in Pittsburgh for projects like this. And I think that you can see from the way he has presented that they think about it thoroughly. And so with that, welcome aboard, Dan.
And
thank you, Grant. Very unrehearsed. I appreciate that.
And you will be hearing more from our advocacy team. Like I said, our goal is to educate and advocate for the kind of changes that will allow safe and affordable housing options to be created. And ADUs is one of the ways we think that can be done. So thank you. And maybe we can come back another time and talk some more about this.
Yeah, hopefully we can be a resource.
So I just wanted to address the question that Millie had in the chat here. Nobody's proposing a changing to the zoning at this time.
Right.
ADUs are a concept that would be part of a conversation, whether or not they would be appropriate in the Oakland context. There is certainly ample opportunity within the neighborhood planning process and through extensive public conversation for us to sort of tease this out further. So this is by no means like, and here it is. This is more just like introducing the topic and what do people think about this idea? What kinds of things? How does this fit into your idea about Oakland? How does this fit into your idea of families of choice and ways of kind of creating community that are not sort of solely based on the nuclear family idea of what constitutes long-term residency or long-term investment in the community or neighborhood? How does this specifically impact older people? There's lots and lots of questions that we can debate. And so I'm curious to hear from other people that are not me, what kinds of questions they might have about, all of the issues that we've brought up in today's discussion. And please feel free to unmute yourself and join in.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm Sergeant Ripple from Zone 4. I got on late and I apologize. I was having computer issues. I had a question. With the popularity of e-bikes, with the senior population getting out, getting more exercises, is there going to be any thought to parking on the second floor or some type of thing that lock up bikes or, for people who want to go out for a nice ride? Because e-bikes can be kind of heavy. I don't know if they want to be lugging them around or access to bike lanes.
The answer is yes. There are actually 2 levels of parking, just to be very clear. I showed the floor plan of the second floor. There's also parking on the first. We're very sympathetic to the idea that biking in Oakland is a very important asset. And we want to make sure that we provide bike access on probably both levels as well from a safety standpoint. So we can even get in touch with Bike Pittsburgh, who were part of that organization and try to understand their assistance with that. So that's a very good question.
Just to contextualize that also slightly though, the proposed BRT change through Oakland will transform the current counterflow bike lane on 5th Avenue to a 2-way bicycle protected lane. So there will be safe bicycle passage through that corridor, which currently does not exist at all, really.
Okay, thanks,
Can I ask a quick question? I was curious if, particularly with like some of the outdoor space, like the linear park, if you're thinking of including any like outdoor exercise equipment. There's quite a few pieces that have been developed, particularly for folks who are aging in place or kind of the growing elderly population, sort of like elliptical type machines and things, but they're meant for being outdoors, and it could be an interesting place to sort of have some outdoor exercise opportunities.
Wow, that is a great idea. So Kate, do you want to be on the committee to do that?
Sure. Anytime I can add playgrounds for kids and adults, I'm all for it.
The idea of showing wellness as a brand attribute of Oakland, as you come up Forbes Avenue and look to the left and you see multi-generational people being in active participation with each other. What a message, what a message. Great idea, thank you. That's exactly the type of feedback that we would enjoy moving forward, from this meeting.
I know that this is a little early days, but I was kind of hoping from a personal perspective that this building as a gateway to Oakland would really feature, a sustainable approach to architecture. There's a number of buildings right next to it that kind of, chose to take a pass on whether or not there could be any lead elements or building wellness. And I'm sure that, this comes into play, especially as you're talking about this being a home for people for decades.
So one of the things about this funding stream, the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, they are a cutting edge environmental sustainable organization. So to submit an application for this, which is very competitive, you have to meet very strict guidelines, whether it's passive house, zero energy, different Department of Energy, energy requirements, enterprise green communities. We've done all of those. So it just depends on what would be most appropriate for an L-shaped building in an urban situation. But the answer is yes, this is going to be on the high end of that. It has to be actually to get the funding for the housing tax credit.
I'm sorry, Sergeant Griffin again, if I may. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know if it was discussed access to the building during emergencies for like fire, medics, or police. Like a lot of buildings have codes that police departments or fire departments have in case of emergency and trying to get into the building. So it would be nice to meet with you. I mean, if that's something that we can help you with, so that you know how we currently do it, just to try to have some way that we can actually access in an emergency situation.
Yeah, that would be great. We would really welcome that. I mean, safety is a #1 issue for us in all of our communities. You know, we tend to have a great relationship with local fire departments, police departments. So we would love to have your input during the planning process on, you know, best ways to do that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm having trouble with the chat, but Dave Schifrin, one of my officers, is on. If he could put our contact information in the chat room, and that way you guys can do that if you want to get in touch with us.
Great, thank you.
We'll make sure to make that connection. If it doesn't happen in this particular moment, we can still make sure. Do others have questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I guess I was driving whenever some of this conversation was going on, so I kind of missed understanding how the ADU fit into the project that Dan Rothschild was talking about. And let's see, Grant and Jeff were talking about owner-occupied homes with some unit that is offered as housing to seniors, I guess?
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify just real quick, Millie, that the two things are not necessarily immediately related, right? So the presentation from Dan Rothschild.
I wondered if they were same. And that brings me to my observation that in my Oak Cliff neighborhood, when I moved in there 40 years ago, there were many homes, and I know even before my husband and I moved into the neighborhood, there were many homes where there was a single, like an elderly person who rented out a room to a mortuary student who was right next to me. They did that all the time. But then, because of our absentee landlords, we don't have that home ownership anymore, except for somebody like Elena, who has an apartment downstairs. But I'm not sure that I could count on my one hand people in my neighborhood that would be able to do that, because it ends up being absentee landlords now. And I don't know how you make that switch. We would love to have owner-occupied homes in Oak Cliff, but I don't see it happening unless we do something about the garbage and the parking. That's my only comment.
Okay, just very quickly, we are making contacts with people to find out about those issues and to start to show how our plans work that might help those that are in that neighborhood. But there is no connection between the projects. So we're learning from what's going on here, and we were hoping that we could share expertise in different areas to the benefit of both.
All right, well, come to Oak Cliff, come to one of our meetings, and I'm sure that our president and vice president will give you the floor and try to figure out how to turn our absentee landlord properties into owner-occupied properties. Would be wonderful.
Okay, thanks, Millie. Any other questions?
Okay, I have a question. It's Bob Harper here. I'm thinking that if I were a potential resident of a group living, and I were elderly, I would want not to live on a college campus, which virtually Oakland is. And I would want to live in a walkable neighborhood with access to a grocery store. And Oakleaf does not yet have a grocery store. So you talk about people being siloed. I think I would just sit there and grow old and miserable. It's just not an environment for me as an elderly person. Whereas, you know, somewhere with flatter streets like Atwood, if they would put in a grocery store, it's very nice and walkable. Yeah, I would want to live in a mixed community where I could see children running and playing. You don't see that in Oakland. So I want to say something very positive. I think the design is spectacular. And the concept of the entrance to Oakland, I would love to see that building there. And I would love to see people living there who would be happy to be there, or like students or something, or professors who want to be near the campus, or people who work at UPMC. I really like the architecture and I would support having a building there. I'm just curious about the population who would live there, if they would be happy, that's all.
Yeah, I would just comment that probably the most popular thing in our industry right now is the co-location of senior housing on college campuses. It's being done all over the country. The opportunities for people to audit classes, to be have intergenerational opportunities. You Google that, you will see that all over the literature. We've already made some overtures, University of Pittsburgh, Chatham, and others. And I really love the model. We have a community right across the street from Westminster College in New Wilmington, very vibrant. The student resident interaction is invaluable. It's just such a great model for us. One of my personal favorites.
I'm very glad to hear that, Jim. That's very encouraging. Now all we need is a grocery store.
Yeah, and walkable is a good issue, and you know, Oakland somewhat walkable, even though there's some grades in that area. But all good points. Thank you.
I just want to tease the fact that Pitt has announced its intention to develop a grocery store 1 block away from this proposed development. On the opposite side is McGee at Halkett and the Boulevard of the Allies. So technically, this will be, in fact, actually within walking distance of a grocery store, provided all things go well with that. So, which is good news, not just obviously for this project, but for all of Oakland, since that one theme is something that we have heard more or less relentlessly since I was a little girl. I thank you so much, seriously, for taking the time to present. And I know that this is an issue and a project that is going to generate a lot of interest. And I don't pretend for a second that this little slot of time is really adequate to kind of really dive into any of the issues that are really connected with this. Density, seniors aging in place, affordable housing, LGBTQ friendly communities. Like there's lots and lots of things that are in here, but I just really appreciate people kind of churning this around in their brains. And I really am very grateful to you guys for coming and presenting here. But I would like to move us along. In response to specific neighborhood interests and questions, we have with us a couple of representatives, or at least I see Dara, I'm not sure who else, from the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. And we want to talk a little bit about road closures and how that happens in Oakland, provided we're good. Are we good?
Andrea, I'm going to say goodbye. I have
of course, no problem.
things I have to do around the house.
Thank you again.
Again, I really appreciate your time.
Thank
you for the opportunity, and thank you for the feedback.
Thank you. So sorry, Dara, would you like to?
Hi, Andrea. Thank you. I'm actually joined by Erin Clark. She is working on our COVID streets, slow streets response. So I guess she has a couple of slides. I don't. I'm here to kind of talk about any potential long-term closures and questions that might be related to those. So I guess, wherever you as a group or whoever wants to go first, we're happy to do that.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Clark. Andrea, I'm happy to start it off. I knew you sent over some general questions or things you thought the community might be interested in hearing about. So I can talk specifically about the kind of pandemic response temporary street closures and parking lane cafes I knew you had mentioned as well, if that sounds good with you to just kick it off with that.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to get a bunch of questions, but I just thought as a starting place, we could start there. So
sure,
please.
So I just dropped a lot of links in the chat, but they're also in the presentation that I can provide a PDF to you afterwards, Andrea, to send out. Let me share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that slide? Great. So just here to generally, I know we don't have much time dedicated to Dara and I this evening, but wanted to talk quickly to provide some information and to point folks in the right direction to find more detailed information about our temporary outdoor dining and retail program. So this includes the parking lane closures and the full street closures that you'll see around the city and in Oakland for primarily outdoor dining, but are also available for retail. So repurposing parking lanes and full streets for that purpose. This program started in response in June of 2020 in response to the pandemic when most indoor dining was restricted. And has continued as businesses are still really struggling to recover and will be continuing to struggle to recover from the impacts that the pandemic had on their businesses. So it's repurposing the public space to aid businesses. Primarily restaurants are the ones taking advantage of the program. So where you can find information, some of the links I dropped in the chat, but we've streamlined all the information on our website. This is just a screenshot here below of an example of the parking lane cafe permit. So it shows you that you need a DOMI permit as well as a temporary occupancy permit from PLI. And we have an application guide, an application video, and a guidance document on that website. Specifically for parking lane cafes, these permits are valid as of right now through December 31st, the end of 2021. Some of the requirements, it seemed there's interest in knowing that. And again, there's more detailed information in our guidance documents online. But for parking lane cafes, the street must be city-owned. PennDOT or state-owned roads have different requirements. And we can't permit these on state-owned roads. The speed limits have to be 25 miles per hour or slower. They must be placed directly in front of the applicant's business frontage unless they have approval from the neighboring property owners. There must be things like minimum clearances to utilities, fire hydrants, transit stops, loading zones, and accessible parking spaces. And for design requirements, I know there seem to be some specific questions about shelters and other installations and elements that are permitted to be included. All the elements included in the cafe space must be designed for easy installation and removal. These are temporary right now, and installations may not be attached to the street. We have specific guidelines that are linked here and on our website that are titled Winter Guidelines for Outdoor Dining and Retail, because those came up when people were wanting to start installing heating elements, shelters, and lighting into their outdoor dining space. But it applies year round, and essentially lightweight tents that are secured with like sandbags, for instance, or what a lot of folks use, but can be removed easily, are permitted, as well as some electric heating elements and lights. But permanent built structures are not permitted under this program. So we're really talking about like the wind sails, if you've seen those, and the kind of pop-up canopies are what we're permitting on a temporary basis for this program. And then just really quickly for our full street closures, we only have 2 remaining full street closures permitted in the city right now. That's on Oakland Ave between Forbes and Senate, and 20th Street between Smallman and Mulberry in the Strip. In 2020, we had 5 of these full street closures. These permits are also valid through the end of the year, and some of the requirements, which there are more online on our website and in the guiding documents, include a site plan, general support from business owners, property owners, and residents on the proposed block, emergency access, so you have to maintain emergency access on any of the closed roads, accessibility, and maintain public transit, so we're not shutting down streets where there are transit stops that can't be easily rerouted. So I know that was a very quick and broad overview. Happy to, I shared those links in the chat. I'm happy to answer questions after folks have had a chance to look through that, those guidelines and documents. But
Erin, I
yeah.
just wanted to say straight up, we had a couple questions in the chat here that are about the temporary versus permanent. So I'm imagining, but I don't want to have to characterize that the question has to do with the durability of the closure that's, for instance, right now on Oakland Avenue, right off of Forbes, whether that's maybe something that might become permanent, or whether that is also something that is only going to extend through December 31st, and or if there's any kind of public process if there is a desire to permanently close a street for through traffic.
Yeah, so right now they are only permitted through the end of the year. We have heard interest from businesses across the city and neighborhood organizations across the city to make some form of this program permanent. So essentially options for annual permits like we would issue for outdoor dining, like sidewalk cafes, which we have always traditionally permitted. That process for sidewalk cafes, which is much different, but now is in our municipal code and requires reviews from PLI zoning and DOMI, as well as a letter of support or acknowledgement from the council person in which the sidewalk cafe exists, in the district in which the sidewalk cafe exists. So essentially what would have to happen in order to make this program permanent is likely some ordinance changes, as well as DOMI and other department guidelines. Like, this is a new program. It was stood up quickly because it was an emergency response program for COVID to allow safe space for dining and recreating. But yeah, there would have to be a more formal process put in place to continue this program. It can be temporarily extended in order to aid the businesses beyond December of this year, but that would still be a temporary amendment or program, and at some point would have to get formalized into a permit with fees attached to it for use of the public space. And criteria around notification and support potentially of council members, like we've had historically for other outdoor dining and special events. So.
Great. Do we have other questions about this temporary program?
We do have, it may have closed recently, but I can look to reopen it. I see there's a question about input. We've had an Engage PGH page up through the duration of the pandemic. It may have closed just at the beginning of summer of this year, because I think we had it open for 1 calendar year and it opened in June of last year. So we had an Engage PGH page in which residents did provide feedback on and ask questions. Again, I can confirm that maybe gets reopened as a way to start collecting additional feedback, but we did hear from some residents in that way and have been working with some of the neighborhood organizations for these installations.
This is Elena from Oak Cliff. I think one of the problems is that there's nothing that the residents can do beforehand. We have no voice before it's closed and then, oh, it's closed. And so that's one of the process questions.
Yeah. I mean, I agree this will have to be a more formalized process moving forward. Again, this was intentionally done as a rapid emergency response because of COVID and the pandemic, and needing to kind of expedite the kind of normal regulatory process that we had in municipal code, which was waived by a temporary amendment from City Council that expires at the end of this year. And so the continued kind of recovery of the businesses is why this all happened so quickly originally. And if it were to become a permanent program, there would have to be a more formal policy and likely municipal code changes in place that would obviously require public input as well.
You can say that for Oakland Avenue, but the one off of Craig Street was just closed, and that was a lot after Oakland Avenue. I don't know which one it is, the one that has the golf course on it now, miniature golf on it now.
That
I think there's a request for maybe Myron, or Myron might be parking, but yeah, there have been requests a year after. So
just to clarify, there is no Oakland Open on over in the South Craig Street area, and no street has been closed for the miniature golf. Nor is there currently an application underway for a road closure in that area for the mini golf.
It's advertised.
It was a misadvertisement that went out on the wrong channels. And so, no, that is not actually in the works.
Oh, okay. I saw the ad.
Permitted.
Thank you. So I guess the follow-up question is, well, when is the process going to change so the residents will have a voice ahead of time? I mean, we don't know where the COVID variant is going to go. This could all happen again. And so you've recognized that it's a problem. And I put in the chat the question that I thought the COVID relief ordinance or bill was going to make it very easy to close these streets permanently without the entire legislative process. So please speak to that.
Can you clarify what COVID bill you're talking about, maybe? Are you talking about the federal funding, relief funding that we got?
Yes.
Okay, so that's just federal funding, and the mayor's office and city council approved $1 million of that funding to go toward helping businesses purchase essentially and have more aesthetically pleasing tables, chairs, installations is the word I was looking for. That I think is being managed through the URA, but yeah, we would have to have a more permanent program in place. Like that's just going to aid them as of right now through the end of the calendar year. And at that point, essentially leadership and city council would have to make a determination on what a future program looks like. I'll say like the way municipal code is written right now, DOMI does have kind of broad authority for determining the best use of the right of way. So like street closures can be done, but we would like a formal process in which if these are being used for public or private outdoor dining and recreating space, like what that process looks like, and is something we'd have to at least put in our regulations, if not if it wouldn't be encoded as the sidewalk cafe process currently is in our code. But yeah, we haven't had, I mean, this is never something we had offered prior to the pandemic, and it's just something now that a lot of other cities are doing, and now we're hearing support from the business community, and then a request to kind of have the option to pay permits to occupy the public space. But yeah, by the end of this year, a decision will have to be made on how we're moving forward, whether that's through municipal code changes or a temporary continuance to allow these outdoor dining areas in the public space to continue.
Have you considered reaching out to the Oakland neighborhood organizations prior to making the decisions?
We have spoken with OBID, but we haven't really had community conversations because we don't have a proposal for the path forward as of right now. Kind of waiting for direction from the various departments involved, and then would have to engage City Council on whether or not municipal code changes would be necessary.
Well, I was talking about the neighborhood organizations that represent the residents, not the businesses. Just to
No, I was just saying that's the only organization in Oakland that we've had these conversations with and haven't had public meetings because we don't necessarily.
Yes. So, Aaron, I think everybody is concerned with the justice of closing streets. As a selfish person, I might like to close the streets I live on and turn it into my personal patio. And you wonder how Pitt can close Bigelow Boulevard at will, and they've kept the street up near the Peterson closed for years. And I don't see them paying any rent for this. So the justice of the whole process of taking ownership of public land for private use is a big issue, and I don't have the answer to it, but I realize it's problematic.
Yeah, sorry, I was just looking at some questions in the chat. I would have to ask for a little additional context on the Bigelow Boulevard. I'm not sure whether those are maybe for special events, which do require, or I guess I'll pause there for a second. Were those for special events?
Yeah, I'd say that, sorry, this is Andrea, just breaking in to say that the Pitt's past closures of the boulevard, or excuse me, of Bigelow between the Cathedral of Learning and the Student Union have been for special events. And that kind of permitting is something that is, you can do downtown. And yes, Bob, if you wanted to close your street, you could probably apply for a similar permit. What's required is a permit fee, as well as the agreement of all of the property owners on either side of the street that you want to close. In addition to the safety considerations that are what Aaron was saying about earlier, about the speed and so forth.
Yeah,
I have been tempted many times to opt to try and close the boulevard during the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix, for instance. I would like nothing better than to close a section of the Boulevard of the Allies between Parkview and Dawson and just make people turn around a little bit sooner, but that isn't something that's available to me.
Yeah, so just to echo what Andrea said, those are special events permits. Those go through a full committee, a special events committee that's comprised of representatives from the various departments. And so there is a permit fee attached to that depending on the duration of the event and the type of event. But those are separate than these DOMI outdoor dining permits.
Well, the one up near the Peterson has been like a 10-year special event.
I'm not sure what that closure is for. That's not one of the temporary closures DOMI has done for this purpose. Andrea, I don't know if you can give me a little more context of what that closure is for.
Robert, you mean on the backside by Center Avenue?
Right, you can't come from Center Avenue and come down to Terrace Street anymore because that was been closed for so long. I don't. Yeah.
Sure. I would probably say that you know, I don't want to speak for Erin, but I would probably say that, you know, she and I have only been in Pittsburgh for so long, and that closure certainly predates both of us. So, you know, throughout my time working in the Oakland community, this isn't an issue that I have heard about just yet. So it's not one that I have actively pursued, but I certainly can follow up if that is a request.
Well, I'm just saying that I hear a lot of resentment about the process of closing streets, and it would be good if the process were made known to people so that they felt that it was being done in an equitable way.
Are you talking about a permanent closure versus a temporary?
Well, I'm just talking about all, whether the special events or not. There's a lot of resentment about the inconvenience that people have because others have closed the streets that they're accustomed to using. And they just don't feel that it's being done in an equitable manner. And something has to be done to convince them that it is being done in an equitable manner. And it may mean not closing as many or for as long. So I'm just saying it's a sore point of disagreement between people living in the city.
Bob, I just want to ask for a question here. If what you're talking about is the closure of Sutherland Drive behind the Pete, where access there is restricted. I don't know the answer to this question, but my understanding is that that might actually have been Pitt's right of way, not a through street, and that they acquired it as a private section. So it's possible that it's within their domain, but I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not 100% certain that Dara or Aaron, you would have that information handy, but we can look into it and maybe try and get an answer to that. I don't know what the history is there.
Well, yeah, the issue isn't like this specific spot or that specific spot. The issue is the strategy of designating areas to be closed that impacts the people who are used to using those places, and making that maybe more transparent, or even a little signage saying closed for this event until such and such, like a no parking sign that is when you're going to tear up the streets.
Those signs are required to be posted. Yeah, those signs are required to be posted for special events. Roy, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to make sure that Roy, if you were waiting to ask a question, we managed to get that.
I think with respect to Bob's comment, over the last year or 2 years ago, Mary did some kind of a survey, and the streets around Shinley Park, Squirrel Hill, CMU and so forth, were closed 100 times. So that going from Squirrel Hill to the medical centers, for example, you had to go to a different route. That was 100 times in a year. That seems a little excessive. Somebody ought to be controlling that a little more tightly so that we don't have that problem.
So, Erin and I do not work in our permitting department. So I think that she and I would, not necessarily feel comfortable entirely answering that question the way that it's being presented, given that I am not intimately familiar with that. But, Andrea, if you want to shoot us over an email with some of the lingering concerns after this meeting, we can certainly follow up with our permits department. They are super thorough in the work that they do, and they look at all the impacts to the larger network from specific closures. And unfortunately, it's just kind of part of one of the things of living in a city with aging infrastructure where work needs to be done and upgrades need to be made.
Yeah, I think that we've had this issue a couple of times, and it's come up at Oakwatch meetings as well in the past, that there are different methods for closing a street. So like utilities have a permit, or construction has a permit, or there's a special event, or there's like a private permit that somebody's applied for. And the context in which those kinds of closures happen isn't always necessarily available as, to be considered. So we've had the utilities being granted permits to close half the streets in central Oakland on the very weekend when everybody's moving in, and like things like that, where you can anticipate that there is more than your average resentment and road rage as a consequence of the temporary closure.
Sure.
And this is something that came up repeatedly in Pitt's last institutional master plan process in multiple meetings. A great deal of resentment about the closure of Bigelow and the use of public streets as staging areas for their school buses. And since that time, actually, I don't know for what, like it's all just because of that, but since that time, the number of times that they have closed those streets has in fact diminished substantially. But it's true that there is no ordinance or regime that has actually caused that to happen. That's just a behavior choice. So maybe we if I don't want to characterize other people's concerns, but I'm guessing that it might be helpful to have some clarity from the regulation side.
Yeah. You know, and we're certainly working with utilities to, you know, push them a little bit harder to be a little bit more thoughtful in terms of some of the timing of their construction and disruption. And we're also working with them to try to minimize disruption by, you know, coordinating our efforts so that we only open, if they're going to open the street, that we do an improvement over it, or if we're going to do an improvement, that they do their work underneath it so that the disruption is minimized and, you know, it doesn't get torn up after it's just recently gone in as well. So that's something we're certainly working towards, you know, which is part of the just starting and very long-term effort of the BRT construction that I know all of you guys have started seeing.
Yeah, I would just add to that quickly as a plug that as of spring of 2020, the city has started transitioning, actually a little before that, the city started transitioning all of its permits onto One Stop PGH, which is now a centralized permitting system, which starts to help to alleviate those conflicts or those like repetition. And I think, you know, one of the big picture hopes for that centralized permitting system is to identify competing or back-to-back kind of conflicts or work in the public space. Special events permits are not on One Stop right now, but talking about like construction work, utility work, and full street closures for other reasons, a lot of that now is on One Stop. And so that's helping and now have it centralized. So that's PLI permits as well as DOMI permits, as well as zoning permits. And those used to be a little more siloed. And so getting those into a centralized system is at least a step in the right direction towards starting to alleviate some of those inconveniences.
Before we wrap this up completely, also was hoping that you guys could talk a little bit about the process whereby streets are actually closed permanently, which is to say, like, you know, if, for instance, a complete change of the way traffic flows through the neighborhood were envisioned, you know, is that primarily a legislative? Is that a planning initiative? How does that come about? And what's the public process for reviewing that?
There are a couple of different ways. It depends on what the request formally is. So we can close the street but maintain the right of way, or we can vacate the right of way, which when we do that, the road basically gets split down the middle and it goes to the 50-50 to the adjacent property owners. The vacating of a right of way is a legislative process that has to be approved by council. And closing a street permanently would come through DOMI and have to be approved by us. Either way, depending on the volumes, I know that there's been some concern about some of the discussion about Zulema Street. So something of that nature would require a specific traffic study that would come to DOMI. There would be mitigation required, traffic modeling that would be required as well. And then, you know, potential improvements that might help offset some of that. You know, so those would come through us. They would have to be reviewed, approved, potentially augmented. And then, you know, again, whether it stays part of the right of way. And, you know, in the case of Zulema, if it were to stay part of the public right of way, since some of the adjacent land is city owned land, it would be a city public process on what the actual, you know, space becomes. And there would certainly be an opportunity for engagement that way. If it comes from if the request to close the street comes from a developer, it's a little bit different. You know, and that would go through the planning commission and the opportunity for engagement that way, or if the developer chooses to do some other kind of work with the community ahead of that. So you will certainly know about any street closure proposals well before they are actually done or considered.
Do others have other questions about the street closure that we can address quickly before we launch into Oakwatch? Dara and Aaron, I really, really want to thank you for your time and your patience. I know that we've been stretching a little bit over, but I do appreciate your time and your willingness to be available for people's questions. And if people have additional questions, I will be very happy to forward those along. And I'm just really grateful to you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, everyone. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Andrea, and Andrea has our contact information. I'm happy to answer questions, or if we can't answer them, to direct them to the right folks in our department or others.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thanks. And I'm going to shift gears right now and introduce Elena and Liz, who will be carrying forward with the Oakwatch updates. Take it away, Elena.
Thank you. I'm Elena Zaitzoff. I'm the chair of Oakwatch. We start our Oakwatch meetings with the mission statement. The Oakwatch Code Enforcement Project works to improve the quality of life in Oakland by bringing people and institutions together to identify code violations, advocate for their remediation, and monitor the outcomes. As far as code enforcement news goes, there was a code enforcement walk on Friday, August 6th in Central Oakland. And Liz, are you able to tell us what happened? Where it was?
Yeah, no, we went, okay. Marie Shuley had contacted me regarding some problems or ongoing problems with a couple of places over in Atwood. So basically, you know, and over the last couple of weeks, Central Oakland has, well, I shouldn't say over the last couple of weeks, for a while now, there's been issues, severe issues over there. But we went around Atwood Avenue, Atwood Street, Uri Way, Cable Place, in the Semple Business District. It's a small section of Central Oakland with a great deal of issues. There's various citations, I believe, were written. There's also some tree issues that we're now investigating because we've got trees pulling up the sidewalks. And in the Uri Way, there is additional problem of trash containment that just doesn't exist, okay? And the other problem, which we're seeing more and more in Central Oakland, is cats. We have a very large feral cat community, and it's creating numerous issues, not just with the trash, but they really make themselves at home wherever they want to. So that's something that we're going to be working with the Humane Animal Rescue Society. We went down onto Semple, and as you know, this is where the Little Yellow Hut is on Semple, which DOMI is going, actually went, and they've been told, you know, this has to go, and they have until next week to get it down, and there'll be another inspection. They're looking at some of the other issues with regard to the water drainage off of Semple going down St. James Way, which is causing severe erosion down that side street. Just about wraps it up. Oh, and the ongoing issue with graffiti, which is something that Central Oakland is drowning in right now. And that is going to be working with Bob Charlin on that, and with Detective Sloan. I think that pretty much sums it up.
Thank you. And another walk is being planned for September in South Oakland. I don't know if we have the specifics on it yet, but you'll be hearing about that. Yeah. And next, the RPP code, amendments to the RPP code are supposed to be in the works. The timeline was April, a public survey was closed. In May, the city staff was to draft potential amendments to it. I don't know if that was accomplished. In May and June, there were to be virtual public meetings, but they weren't held. And in June and July, the city council was to consider the potential amendments. And obviously that didn't happen either. One of the neighborhood organizations has asked the mayor's office to look into it. And we're also looking into a right to know request that was filed a year and a half ago, I guess, by 3 organizations on this topic, and none of it has been fulfilled. Any questions about any of that? Okay, our problem properties, Liz, can you report on those? You're muted.
Yeah, I just did that. Okay, with Yarrow Street, okay, which is formerly known as Zero Boundary. Okay, it is now called 537 Yarrow Street on all the court documents and everything. They have submitted a new application with regard to the retaining wall, which is in response to an eroding situation down there. The application was submitted and then they had to, PLI requested revisions and the revisions have been sent in. So that's still at zoning because they're looking at the revisions. So we're kind of on a hold with that right now. 2610 Forbes Avenue. It is a city-owned property. It is condemned. Right now, they're boarding it up. They're trying to keep the area clean. But again, Oakland is getting hit severely by the graffiti. So they can, they just keep painting it. It keeps getting tagged. 3221 Kenneth Square. Okay, they're actually back in Common Pleas Court because even though they were granted the 2-family occupancy, they have to apply for a permit for that, and they have not done so. Okay, so right now it's still standing as a single family. That's what the permit reads. So there's going to be a hearing on that. I haven't gotten a new date, so as soon as that comes up, I will let you know. Okay. Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry. There's a date. December the 7th, 2021. So we can all hold our breath. The 3401, 3421 Bates Street in Coltart House. They're basically gone. Okay. Yay. Finally, Liz can quit taking pictures of them. 5 years. So they're down. The next process is they have to remove all the bricks and everything, and then they bring in the backfill, and then they will seed it, and then they will straw it. It will have like one of those soft fences around it while the grass is taking root. Okay, so that people can't trample all over it. Sadly, we did lose a couple of large branches on the trees down there in Zalima Park, and that's being cleared up. 3421 Parkview is kind of in a holding pattern too. The owner is deceased. Then we have several other ones that basically are in the same position that we're requesting clean and liens from the city, which has been happening pretty regularly. I will say that there is an update with 3204 Niagara Street. I believe the owner has been located, so we're just gonna just wait and see on that one. 3611 Fraser Street. This has been going on for years, and for some reason, another criminal complaint has been issued against the couple, but unfortunately, the couple have been deceased for a decade. 1 Air Street, that's still ongoing. We can't locate the owner on that property either. Right now, we have no housing courts coming up this week or next week. And we did have a hearing in Common Pleas Court with regard to a rooftop deck down on Wellsford. The gentleman has been given 30 days to follow the proper procedure. I spoke with him. He is going to apply, and I've told him, you do the process, but part of that process is the community has the ability to respond. Okay, because he has to go for a variance. And it's not just an occupancy permit. So we'll just have to wait on that one. But otherwise, that's about it.
All right. Any questions on any of those? Okay, thank you. On to our updates. The reports on almost all of these are on opdc.org/Oakwatch. So we'll start with the Zone 4 Police, Officer Schifrin or Sergeant Griffin.
Yes.
There it is.
Sorry, I'm sorry, David, Mr. Officer Schiffrin, you're muted. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry. Okay. So I think you'll have seen the overview there, the months. So I won't go into all the details. Then is that the idea? We'll save a little time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Then I'll focus just on a few that seemed worth noting. For instance, there were thefts from person that were up. That was the biggest jump. There were 5 in the month from June 15th to July compared to July 15th to August 15th. It went from 5 up to 11, so more than doubled. And I thought I'd say a couple of words then about that, since it was one that really had a bigger jump than any other. There were, again, thefts from person. In the grand scheme of things, for the most part, they weren't major crimes. They weren't violent crimes. They weren't robberies, for instance. They weren't residential burglaries or burglaries where people seem to be threatened in numbers. But for instance, there were clothing taken from a dryer in a basement, and a wallet that was left unattended on a porch disappeared. At Dan Marino Field, another wallet which had been left out while the person was playing softball came back and found it gone. So I always look for some kind of lesson, of course. There was also a $400 bicycle that was taken from a front porch. And these are all things that if you pay a little more attention to, they're easy to prevent. I encourage people to be alert to their surroundings, but also alert to where they place things. In one of the burglaries, there were 2 guns taken, and that's obviously serious. It happened during a party. And a lot of people apparently were in the home that, among them apparently was at least one thief, because the guns were handguns. They were taken from a dresser drawer reportedly in one of the bedrooms. So I encourage anybody who's having a party to know who's coming to it. Mm-hmm. Really, try to monitor that. And as a safeguard, anything that you've got of value in the apartment, put someplace else that's safer in case somebody wanders into a room or starts going through drawers or anything like that. There was a nice warrant has been issued for someone involved in a theft. I don't want to say too much about it since the investigation is ongoing, but someone was, they had a tattoo that was caught on video, and it was distinctive enough that police in multiple jurisdictions were able, through emailing each other, which is what we do, say we've got this kind of crime that just happened here. Oh, the technology is great in so many ways. I mean, license plate readers are another. Video, in this case, is another. It was able to catch someone's tattoo, and again, it was distinctive enough to track down that person, identify the person. So I mean, I'm a big proponent of the value of technology, really, in investigations and crime solving. There were a couple of thefts of delivered packages. So a suggestion there, of course, is if you're expecting something, just try to arrange a window of time for the delivery, and or have it delivered to a neighbor that you trust, or pick it up yourself at some delivery facility. And if it's through FedEx or Amazon, they're making it easier to pick up delivered packages, just because you can pick them up at their center. Oakland's got a few, I know. There was also a woman who had left a backpack on the front seat of an Uber taken. She got distracted, I guess, by when she was removing a mattress from the trunk and forgot about the backpack. And unfortunately, the Uber driver apparently just made off with it. So again, I'd encourage people to really be careful just as you go about your lives. Just, think about where your things are and anything valuable. And it's easy to be distracted, of course. I mean, just so much seems to be going on. But unfortunately, rest assured that if you don't watch your stuff, somebody else probably is. And they may not be, they may be out to get it somehow. And I don't want to take too much time again. It's been a long meeting, but I'll mention there was a couple of vehicles that were stolen, and as is so often the case, a valet key was left inside the car. So if you've got a valet key or a spare key, really don't leave it inside. Bad guys generally find them. There was one though where the ignition was popped, and it was a 2003 car. So it's old enough that it didn't have, I guess, a modern chip, as most cars have now these days in the key. And the ignition could be popped. So if you've got a car that older that doesn't have a chip for some reason in the key, then really think about getting some kind of secondary security device. They make those clubs that attach to a steering wheel, which you don't see that much because most cars do have chips, but it can be worthwhile looking into one if your car is one that doesn't. And that's about all I'll have to say here tonight.
Thank you. Any questions for Officer Schifrin? Okay, on to public safety, John Tokarski. Hello.
Good evening, everybody. How are you today? I'll just basically give you an overview. This past month, early in the month, the city celebrated National Night Out. The University of Pittsburgh's Police Bureau, with support from our Department of Public Safety and a number of other social service providers, had a tremendous celebration over at the Assembly Plaza in Oakland. So I'd like to congratulate everybody who helped on that and who attended it. Other than that, the information you see in front of you is some information that I'm working on right now. We'll be offering, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed, back in person Citizen and Student Police Academies this fall. The Citizens Police Academy will be beginning in September. The students, which is for high school students, will be in October. And just to summarize briefly for you, they're kind of like an opportunity, a thumbnail opportunity to experience some of the training and the courses that cadets have when they enter the police academy. They're there for a number of things. They're there for, first of all, if you have an opportunity to meet the police officers one-on-one as people who serve you every day that you don't normally get to meet. You get to better understand how they do their work and the policies and laws that govern the way they do their work. And particularly for students, it gives them a good opportunity to see if it might be something they'd like to look for a career in. So I put on the earlier part of this chat line, I put my contact information. If anyone like additional information they're not able to get it off of Oakwatch or the group here, feel free to call me or email me. I'll be unavailable for the next week, but if you call, I'll follow up on it right away to you. Any questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. On to the Pitt Police, Officer Cunningham. Or
yeah, Officer Trimber here.
Okay.
Introduce myself. I've only been on a couple of these Oakwatch meetings. I'm actually, just quick introduction, I'm one of the new neighborhood resource officers along with Officer Colello, who some of you already met. I know Liz has been on the walk with him, the South Oakland walk. So just want to do a quick introduction. And I'm just going to bring up a couple things we have upcoming on campus. The first one is September 14th. We're going to be working with PennDOT to do an event. It's going to be geared toward deterring impaired driving in preparation for the St. Patrick's Day weekend that they're going to be celebrating. So as far as details, we just agreed to help PennDOT with this. So we don't have a whole lot of information right now. but there will be more to come, and we can provide you with additional information in their future before the event starts. Also, just wanted to bring up that with the students coming back now, as well, you are aware of move-in coming this week. We're going to be sending out our impact units, which usually occur after midnight, and this is more for noise complaints, loud parties. So if anybody has complaints of this nature, they can contact Pitt Police, and as you know, generally officers will respond, and myself and Officer Colello, we usually follow up with these. So if there is a complaint at a house, we'll follow up a day or two after and talk to the residents as well, and just let them know, it's not acceptable and what could happen if it continues. Also, with the move-in coming back, a lot of faculty are coming back. We're seeing an increase in traffic and telecommuting. So if there's any questions on pedestrian safety or traffic safety concerns, you can contact Officer Colello. His email is jgc30@pitt.edu. He is our pedestrian safety officer. So if there's any questions or concerns in that area, he'll be more than helpful and willing to assist you with those. All right, and with those being said, I just had there was a couple crime alerts that went out, so I just wanted to discuss those briefly. They were both off campus. One was at the 3400 block of St. James Place. And the victim just stated, this was on August 15th, that an unknown person entered the residence and took personal belongings. We don't have any suspects, and as with everything else, investigation pending, that's as much as we can release what's already out there. The other one was at the 3300 block of Niagara Street on the same day, August 15th. And same thing, residents took personal belongings and suspect unknown. So, and I know Zone 4 already touched on this, just some common sense. We usually tell people, just report suspicious people, crime incidents promptly. The sooner we hear about, the better chance we have to get out there and look for the individual responsible for these burglaries. Just paying attention to your surroundings, trusting your instincts, aware of who you invite into your home, keeping your doors, windows secured. That's, seems to be an issue. And just not approaching suspicious vehicles or people. So, yeah, with that being said, thank you for allowing me to introduce myself and talk. Jamie, I don't know if you have anything to add, any other incidents or issues going on?
Yes, thank you, Dan. You did great. To go off of the crime alerts, if you want to receive our crime alerts, you can go onto our website, police.pitt.edu, and under local crimes, you'll get crime alerts, and you have the option to signing up via text message or email. Also, to help with all of this, 2 times a month during on social media, Instagram, Facebook, we send out 9 p.m. routines, which just pretty much reminds our community to secure their doors, windows of their homes, their vehicles, and not to leave anything out in the open. Other than that, we are good with our report.
Thank you. Gwen from the Parking Authority had a meeting conflict and couldn't be with us tonight, but she did send her her data, and basically in July, all areas got some daytime enforcement, and some of them got nighttime enforcement. So, and nighttime economy, I don't think anybody is with us. Anybody with us?
I'm here.
Rachel, hello.
Hi. Sorry, I was struggling to unmute myself there for a second.
Great.
Hi, everyone. I was on the last meeting, but just in case there's new folks that weren't here last time, I myself am new, so I'm working with Allison Harnden in the Office of Nighttime Economy. So we are sort of the liaison for the city with hospitality businesses and nightlife businesses. Not many Oakland-centric updates, but just wanted to say that we're working on some safety campaigns with graphics for college students as they return. And I think the fakes, I shouldn't say fake, the halfway to St. Patrick's Day Parade is still happening next month. So we've been doing some work with the local universities and the bars to sort of encourage safe behavior during that weekend. And I know that Allison was actually working on a letter that she works on with our public safety department director that she sends out to the universities that I think we're just going to hold for a second, just because I think another large scale parade was canceled in Pittsburgh. I think it was the Labor Day parade. So who knows with the Delta variant and all that COVID brings, but if it does indeed happen, we do send out that letter to universities to encourage safe behavior from students. So that's just a couple of things we're working on, but I will also just, put my email in the chat. Definitely welcome any questions, concerns around things relating to my life. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you. That does it for Oakwatch. Thank you. Back to you, Andrea.
Great, thank you so much. And we've had a little bit of attrition from the participants here because we've gone sufficiently over time. I'm just going to throw it out in general to say if anybody has pressing updates that they'd like to make sure that we are all aware of, speak now. And with that, thank you so much, everybody, for all of your time. And I do apologize that we went over. It's just a function of having too many interesting things to talk about. Please join us next. Our next meeting is going to be pushed back 1 week. So it is not the third Wednesday as is typical, but it is going to be the fourth Wednesday. And this is to accommodate the fact that we were originally scheduled to begin on Rosh Hashanah, and that would not be fair or nice. So we are now beginning on Wednesday, September 22nd. If you receive Oakwatch updates, you will definitely get a reminder of the time change. And we are going to add the Facebook Live to be able to accommodate a slightly wider audience. And these are some links that Kathy has very happily and aptly thrown up. And thank you so much to all of our participants. Thank you to Kathy, who is driving the bus. Thank you to Eric, who is taking notes. And if anybody has any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, have a great evening and thank you all.